made it. We're reaching the end of day 2 here. Welcome to expanding your marketing strategy and how to use Klaviyo to send SMS messages. We all heard the news this morning, so glad you came to learn a little bit more about it. Just quick housekeeping before we get started. Slides will be available, so don't worry about that. They'll be sent out after the show at some point. And then in terms of questions, we're going to do them all at the end. Just to make sure we get through the content, feel free to submit via the app, or we'll do raise of hand classroom style as well. So we should be able to get your questions answered. So the presenter today, Andrea Wan, is sort of the woman behind the feature in terms of doing all the hard work to make it work and make it awesome. So we have the pleasure of listening to her teach us about how it's going to work for you guys, and she'll answer all your questions and get you all ready to go and using SMS and Klaviyo. So please give a warm hand for Andrea Wan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And truly, I don't deserve all the credit. I have a whole team of developers back home who are helping me put all of this together. So really, they're the heroes here. As mentioned, I'm a product manager at Klaviyo. I focus on our mobile app and mobile teams and our accounts and auth team. So for our time today, I'll be talking a little bit about some of the essentials about what you should know before starting to send SMS. We'll then dive into what it means to send SMS in Klaviyo. And finally, we'll wrap up with a quick demo. So starting with some of the essentials, how many of you send SMS today in the US? About half the room. So I think some of you will be familiar, but just to get us all on the same page, I'm going to start with some of the legal stuff. These are things that you should know before you start sending. So there's the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and this is the law in the US that dictates how you can use phone numbers and text messages to communicate from a brand or a business perspective. There's also the CTIA, and this I refer to as the Public Safety Advocates. So while they aren't the law, they are a group of mobile carriers and providers who come together and put together some of the best practices about guidelines and what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to sending SMS. To drive it home why this is really important, if you are found in violation of TCPA, you have to pay between $500 and $1,500 per SMS. So even if you're only sending 100 SMS as an example, those fees really start to rack up if you're not compliant. So this isn't to intimidate you or scare you away from sending SMS, but just things to keep in mind, and I'll show in just a second how easy we make it for you within Klaviyo. So the actual requirements when it comes to sending SMS. First, you have to obtain a written consent and maintain a record of that consent. You want to allow for and adhere to any unsubscribes. So that's where if somebody says they don't want to receive messaging from you anymore, that next message that you send them would be in violation. And finally, you want to remind users how to unsubscribe. So if a user gets SMS messages from you repeatedly and they feel stuck, they don't know how to get out of that situation, they may end up flagging you to their carriers. And that would mean that your carriers start filtering out your number for all recipients, and thus you don't get your messages through. So really the best practice, just remind them how to get out and save yourself some of that headache. And again, Klaviyo makes this easy so that you don't have to worry about how to do all of this within the tool. All right, so let's move on to some of the fun stuff. What does it actually mean to be sending SMS in Klaviyo? So to break it down, I think of SMS as 3 different components. You have a from number, the message content, and a to number. So when we're texting with our friends or family, we're probably not putting that much thought into a from number or a to number. We just open up our contacts list, we choose someone, we start typing. But when it comes to using SMS in your marketing strategy, these are going to be really important. So we'll spend a little bit of time discussing how these all fit together. And starting with the from number, this is going to be one of your first decision points when it comes to SMS. This is going to be the number that SMS subscribers will receive your message from. So a long code is that 10-digit number that we all have. It's the standard area code and then the 7 digits after that is used in most cases for person-to-person messaging, but you can use it for application-to-person messaging. This is always good to have as a backup since not all carriers support shortcodes, but one of the limitations is going to be that lower throughput. So you'll be able to send messages, but kind of at a slower rate. Shortcodes are going to be that 5 or 6 digit number that you might interact with some brands today on. You have the option of a vanity or a random shortcode, where vanity allows you to choose the specific 5 or 6 digits, and random is assigned to you. All the shortcodes go into a US registry of shortcodes, and so the carriers collectively come together to maintain that registry, and thus, if you want a shortcode, you have to go through a pretty lengthy application process. It can take 8 to 12 weeks to actually get your application through, and so you want to keep that in mind when you go about choosing a shortcode and plan that into your timelines. One of the biggest benefits of a shortcode, though, are that they have a really high throughput. So you can send a lot of messages really quickly, and because carriers have already approved your shortcode, you're less likely to be filtered out by the carriers. Now, your final option is going to be a toll-free number. This takes the form of a 1-800, 188, couple of different area codes that it can come under. One nice thing about this is that your toll-free number can match your customer service number. So imagine that your customers are used to calling you on a certain number. Now they can also interact with you on text through that same number. The throughputs here are similar to the shortcodes, that 3 to 150 messages per second. But one limitation here is that you do not get any MMS. So MMS is going to be multimedia messages, and that's where you can attach a video, image, GIF, and kind of send that along with the wording in your message. Now, there's no right or wrong answer for what type of number you should choose. If there was, we would just give you that. So what you want to think about for a from number is really how you want to represent your brand and what's most important for you. And as a reminder, you can always bring over a number and port that into Klaviyo as well. So if you have an existing number you're using with another provider, for example, you can port that over and we'll get you going. So we talked about the from number. Now let's talk about the to numbers. Or actually, before that, I'll show you some things at the account level. So Jake showed this morning how easy and quick it is to get your account set up. With a single button click, you get your number assigned to you. This is to allow you to get going really fast. So once we have assigned that number, you can start testing, you can start sending, you can be unblocked basically from playing around with SMS and getting familiar. At that account level, we also allow you to get some additional numbers. So all the different types that we just talked about are easily accessible within your account. You can put in a request and we'll get back to you very quickly. And so there's no waiting, no delays there. We also have a couple of message add-ons. These are going to be things that allow you to be more consistent with your messaging across your platform, across your account. So they're the organizational prefix and an opt-out language. And I'll pause there because we'll come back to what those actually mean when we dive into the message content itself. Now we'll talk about some to numbers. So equally important in having a from number is having to numbers, or your subscriber list, people who you're actually sending SMS to. And in order to get those subscribers into your Klaviyo account, there are 4 methods that we will support. You can import to a list, subscribe via SMS, collect consent at checkout, and add a phone number input to your form. So importing to a list, this is something that we support today with email, and we'll make it easy to add phone number to that. Since consent is so important when it comes to SMS, there will be a separate call out for consent and updating consent when you upload a phone number file. Capturing consent at checkout. Some of this will lie in terms of how you design your checkout page But basically, you can have an option for people to subscribe or opt into SMS when they are checking out from your store. This is really cool to power some of those use cases around abandoned cart flows, and also just then transitioning into post-purchase flows or order confirmation, delivery confirmation, shipment confirmations. One thing to call out is you'll notice here that the example shows a checkbox for opting into text messaging. You don't have to do a checkbox. There are options there. Basically, the requirement is being very clear about what somebody is subscribing into, but you don't have to do it just in this one way. Subscribe via SMS. So this one is very unique to the SMS experience. And if you attended the keynote this morning, you had an opportunity to try it out for yourself. What you can do with this is basically build out a mobile experience. So when a visitor goes to your mobile site, is browsing around, you can show them this type of pop-up and have them quickly subscribe to your list. They click a button, they open up their Messages app, click another button to send, and basically are subscribed. This means also that you don't get any incorrectly entered numbers because they're not entering it themselves. You're getting it automatically through the SMS that they send to you. And the final option is the phone number input. So if you have a subscriber form today where you're starting to collect email addresses, you can add a phone number input to that, and that allows you to build out richer profiles. So you have not only the email information, but also phone information, and you can play with how you collect preferences, which we'll go into a little later. So we have the from number, we have the to number. Now to fill out that middle, the message content. Earlier today, Jake showed how you can start pulling in SMS actions into Flow, and you can add this to any existing flow or new ones that you create. But we're not going to stop there. We'll also have SMS in Campaigns, so to power some of those cool use cases around new product launches, around sales, that type of engagement, you can use Campaigns, and at that point, we would be rolling out MMS in addition. And the final way is what we're calling one-to-one messaging or SMS inbox. So because of the nature of SMS is very conversational, we want to support the use case around being able to reply to SMS that are coming in so that you can have even more personalized conversations with your subscribers. For SMS and Flows, the real benefit is having one place to view and manage your entire customer journey. So instead of flipping through between a couple of different tabs or programs and trying to piece together what a customer journey looks like, you can just go straight into the Flow Builder and see that in one place. And there are a couple of really interesting use cases that you can build out through the Flow engine that exists today. For example, going back to that abandoned cart use case, you could use SMS as a backup to email. So you send that first email after somebody abandons their cart, and only if they don't engage with that email, then you use SMS as a way to try to re-engage or capture that engagement. This has a couple of benefits for your subscribers as well. It means they're not going to get too many messages from you. It means that it's more personalized and you spend a little less also because you are only sending SMS where it's really going to be valuable and useful. And it means that you can just have all of that data in one place and see really the value of adding SMS in addition to email. Another interesting use case is to set up an A/B test. So some of you might not know whether or not SMS is a good decision for your brand. One way to answer that question is by setting up an A/B test. With the conditional splits and flows, it's really easy to go ahead and split 50-50 and see email versus SMS side by side how those perform. You click the Show Analytics, and basically it flips those cards into showing the last 30-day performance, and you can compare right there and then and decide whether you want to change the weights of your split one way or the other. And final use case is around gathering and respecting some of those preferences. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have both email and SMS information about a profile, doesn't mean you should just go ahead and email and SMS, send them SMS all the time. Instead, we can be a little bit more thoughtful about how to engage with each profile. And so if you're able to collect some preferences, you can then use those splits to say, if somebody wants to engage over email, send them email. If somebody wants SMS, go ahead and send them SMS. So with the content builder, Jake showed a little bit about this too, but I'm going to dive into some more detail here and point out some of the cool things that are included. The first is really about the personalization of your message without adding any additional code or worrying about syntax. So on the right-hand side here, there's an event properties panel. You'll have details about your event or your profile if it's a non-event triggered flow, and you'd be able to grab any of those properties, pull them over into your messages body right there, and you're good to go. So for example, if you wanted to pull the checkout URL for your abandoned carts, you just take it from the right-hand panel, put it into your message body, and don't have to worry about whether you've spelt anything correctly, typed anything correctly. We'll handle that for you. SMS messages have a limit of 160 characters if they're GSM7 encoded. They would only be not that way encoded if you add a special character, such as an emoji. So we'll go ahead and give you those previews right here so you know exactly how many messages you're sending and what that experience will look like. Additionally, because character count is so important, we'll go ahead and shorten links for you. So URLs typically can get really long and eat up a lot of those character counts. By having us shorten the links, we'll go ahead and cut down how many characters that will take, but also you get the benefit of having us track your clicks. So anytime somebody clicks on that link within your SMS message, we're able to track it back to this message and sort of attribute any actions off of that. The message add-ons that I mentioned earlier also come into play here. So the organization prefix and the opt-out language, we provide you some shortcuts here to be able to toggle them on and off very easily within each message. The organization prefix is really important to identify your brand to your recipients. So whereas in email you have a from email address and you can customize that to represent your brand, here just having a number that it comes from doesn't tell the recipient who it's coming from. So it's important to identify yourself using your organization name. Similarly, with the opt-out language, if you toggle that on, we'll add it to the end of your message as a way to remind subscribers of how they can unsubscribe or stop getting messages. Unlike email, you don't have to include an unsubscribe or an opt-out language in every single message, but again, it is good practice to remind people, so use it at your discretion, but on a regular basis. And finally, it would be negligent of us not to show you how your analytics or how your SMS are performing within analytics. So similar to how we provide some analytics on the flow side with email, you'll be able to do that with SMS as well. With SMS, you'll be able to set a separate attribution window where it reflects the behavior of SMS versus email and get some insights on how your SMS is performing. One thing to keep in mind with SMS versus email, SMS doesn't have open rates. The carriers don't tell us when you open an SMS or read an SMS. Instead, we have to use the click links. So your click rates are going to be really important to understand how your recipients are engaging with any SMS. And then similarly, we'd be able to take any conversion data, conversion metrics, and tack it on based off of those clicks. With this page as well, we'll go ahead and tell you how many were successfully delivered, any failed deliveries that you can take a look into and understand whether there are any trends to look out for there. And with that, I actually want to toggle us over into a quick demo. Cool. So I'm back in the Klaviyo account from this morning, back in my flows here. And when I open it up, what I want to jump to is the analytics for this particular message. So you can see at a quick glance we had over 562 subscribes and a 25% click rate, which is pretty good. If I want to know exactly who has clicked, I can go ahead and look at the details for each of those numbers. And drilling in even further, you'll see at the profile level, we do track all of the same types of data that you might expect that we track for emails. So we'll know anytime an email or an SMS is sent out, anytime you receive an email, receive an SMS coming back, any clicks there, all of that data lives in your profile. So you have access to rich SMS data, email data, profile properties, all of that really in one place. I also want to circle back on the sign-up form that we took a look at this morning. If you've used Klaviyo's sign-up forms, you know how easy it is to drag and drop and create the type of form and an experience that you want on your site. For SMS in particular, we have a new button, click action, which is that subscribe via SMS. So we make it really easy for you to create that experience that you had this morning. With the subscribe via SMS, we go ahead and toggle the form to be mobile only. And this is because it doesn't really make sense for that experience to live on desktop because you don't have access to the same Messages app or that considerations. With a mobile-only type of experience, we also allow you to customize that opt-in message or the message that gets pre-populated when you open up that Messages app. The key thing here is that you have to include the opt-in keyword for us to recognize that it is a consent, but you can get creative with the actual text or the copy within the opt-in message. Now, I also want to call out a quick bit of information that's really important when you're thinking about building sign-up forms to collect SMS consent, and that has to do with all the disclosures. So remember how I said it's really important that you tell your subscribers what they're signing up for? This is the recommendation of including information about how often they're going to receive texts, what types of texts they might receive, and including links to your terms of service and privacy policy. Once you're done configuring all of that, we take care of basically the actions on the back end so that once you click publish, you'll have that experience on your mobile site and you're good to go. So coming back into our slides here, there's always the question of what do the timelines look like? When can I get this? So as I talked about a little earlier, we're thinking about this in different iterations. At Klaviyo, we really believe in building products that bring value and are high quality for our customers, but not everything is going to come at once. So the first launch for SMS in Flows is going to be Q4 of 2019. Jake mentioned October this morning. In Q4, we'll also be launching SMS Campaigns. We're starting in Flows because that is a huge unlock for a lot of use cases that are really unique for SMS and email playing in the same space. Campaigns will come later to empower a lot of those cool use cases around product launches, notifications, sales, that type of thing, and will include MMS, as mentioned. And the third, the SMS inbox, will come later in mid-2020. The caveat is that this launch is starting with SMS in US only. So each country is very specific around the types of guidelines and consent considerations that they have. So we are going to do it on a rolling basis, starting in the US and then moving into other countries. If you have a particular country that you'd love to see us go into, please let us know. It will help us prioritize and understand where we should move on to next. And so I do want to call out a little bit of, we know that we're not the first ones out there to put SMS into a marketing platform. But how does Klaviyo compare? And I break it down in terms of SMS-only solutions or platform solutions. When you think about SMS-only solutions, they are great. They're really powerful, oftentimes very easy to use, but they're very limited, especially in segmentation and in how you can interact with them in flows. Because it is SMS only, you oftentimes only have your SMS data. You don't have all of the rich profile data that you can then use to be more personal and targeted about your messaging. And similarly with flows, because it's only SMS, you only see your SMS-related touch points. For platform solutions, on the other hand, they do well in those areas, but oftentimes they leave you on your own when it comes to getting subscribers and compliance. They trust that you're going to go handle that and put that kind of burden on you. But at Klaviyo, we believe that we should think about it as a holistic tool that helps you get up and running quickly and fast. So we're including all of that into our launch 1, and then moving into campaigns and inbox for launches 2 and 3, respectively. So with that, I'll leave you with some resources where you can go and find more information. So that features page with our SMS is where you can go ahead and start signing up for SMS updates. And stay tuned, because we'll be sure to push out some updates there very quickly. Thank you.
All right, so we'll do Q&A now. I've got one here from the app that I think we'll start with. Let me just remind myself to make sure I do it right. Yes, so you mentioned SMS Inbox and how that's coming later, and that's more the reply to. Is there a way for customers now, with the way the feature is being built, to, like, if someone replies to that automated text through a flow, for example, is there a way to see that message and or reply to it currently?
Great question. So within the profile timeline view that we took a look at, you'll see all the messages that you send to them and any messages that they send to you. So you do get a whole view of all the communications going back and forth. Currently, there will not be a way to respond back through an SMS, but you could follow up through other means or separately in a separate channel.
Yes.
Sorry, on that note, is there a way for customers to know that we can't reply?
Yep. So not sure if any of you texted in something else to the number this morning, but if you did, you might notice that you got a response back, a thank you for attending type of message. So we will support having a default message where if they text in with anything that doesn't match a keyword, you'll be able to set what message you want them to receive back. So it could be send your question to the support@whatever.com email address, or it could be a call us at type of situation.
Yes.
In the back end, you showed the phone number profile. How would that look with when you have one profile that you get email and SMS? Will they combine?
Yep.
So for those in the back, just in
right.
case they didn't hear, if there's a profile, for example, already in Klaviyo that has an email address and they come and they add their phone number, how does Klaviyo sort of handle the possible merging of those profiles? Is it separate? How does it get worked there?
Yep. So with profiles, it would be a singular profile where you'd be able to see all the data about a person. So it would have their phone number and email all in one place, and you would see all of the events in one place. So we would handle the merging if it's coming through that you signed up from the subscribe via text, and then you go through a link, follow a link, place an order, we get all of that information back, and we can attach it to that same profile. If you sign up with the phone number input, then we already have the email and phone number all in one place attached to a single profile.
Yes.
Will there be the option to have different types of lists that they can opt in and out of preferences? So like maybe they want to receive one type of messages, they can opt out of that, but still receive another type of messages from us, the same way email works?
Question is around like managing preferences around communication for different SMS, like list-based preferences or communication style.
So one thing that's a little bit unique around SMS is as soon as they text stop, you absolutely have to opt them out of everything. But you can get creative about how you opt them into different lists, and that's where that join keyword is going to be key. So that keyword is matched to a specific list, and different keywords can be matched to different lists where you could vary the frequency of communications.
Yes.
Would you expect the second launch to be in time for Black Friday?
Yeah, sorry. So for those in the back, the question was around timing of the second launch in time for BFCM, Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yes, that is our goal, to have it well in advance of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. There are some uncertainties when it comes to building software, so I can't guarantee that, but that is what we're racing towards.
Saw one over here, yes.
What if we have our newsletter sign up and it says, we send a clear newsletter and we want their phone number now. Is there a way to, create two
The question there was around, for those who couldn't hear it, around collecting phone numbers and emails at the same time, or if it knows an email address and not a text message, can it like pre-populate like the form does now.
Bottom again is a newsletter pop-up if they've already,
Subscribed. Yes.
Yep. So with Klaviyo Forms, you can actually target each form to a specific segment. So you could create a segment that has email already and one that doesn't, and then target each of those forms differently.
I saw John's first. Yeah.
For the people that don't use Klaviyo Forms but other types of pop-ups, have you guys thought about support or integrations for any of those types of things?
So the question was around if you're not using Klaviyo Form Builder, how do we support SMS inclusion for other types?
Yep. So the important part there is that we're getting that information passed about the phone number mapped to the phone number on the Klaviyo profile and the indication of consent. So as long as that information both gets passed into Klaviyo, then you'd be unlocked from sending them SMS.
Great.
In your flow example, you said to send an SMS if they didn't know the email. What if that particular email recipient doesn't have an opt-in SMS? Can we verify? Is there a condition options to check if they have SMS?
Yeah, so the question there was, in the example shown in the presentation, there was a flow that triggered an SMS if someone didn't open the first abandoned cart email. And the question is really like, how does it check to make sure that person is subscribed to SMS?
Yep. So by default, if somebody is triggered up for that flow action, then they don't have an SMS number. They wouldn't be able to get an SMS anyway, so we'd skip over that. But you could also add a filter on that particular action and just say, if they don't have SMS consent, filter them out from receiving that.
Yes.
If they type stop, to opt out of SMS, do we have to opt them out of email as well, or are they considered separate opt-in and outs?
Yeah, so the question there is if they opt out of one communication channel, for example, they opt out of SMS, does Klaviyo consider that an opt-out of email, or is that on the user, or how does that generally work?
Yep, so you can treat them separately. So if somebody opts out of SMS, we do not touch their email preferences, so you can continue engaging in email with them.
Is it best practice to opt them out of both, or is it still just per channel?
It's mostly per channel. I think you can play around with asking and following up and saying, oh, do you also want to opt out of email, for example, but there's no legal obligation to opt out of both.
I don't know. I got this one first. I saw so many hands. I got.
Is SMS can be set up to do transactional flows as well, or just marketing based?
Question is, for those who can hear, is SMS set up to do transactional messages as well?
Yes. So the order confirmation, delivery confirmation, shipment confirmation, those types we would consider to be transactional, and so you'd be able to mark those as transactional on the flow action.
Cool.
Can we talk about attribution? If you send an email and an SMS and someone makes a purchase, do both channels get credit for the attribution in terms of reporting, or is it just the most recent? How does that work, I guess?
Yeah, question was around attribution. If you're sending both communications out in the same period of time, sort of how does Klaviyo figure out how to assign the dollars if they make a purchase?
Yeah. So with attribution in Klaviyo, it's really important that we don't want to double count anything because that would mess up your numbers, be inaccurate. So how it would work is based off of the most recent activity. So if they received both email and SMS, whichever one they interacted with the most recently before they made that purchase would be how we attribute back.
Yep.
Are there custom UTM parameters for text separate from email?
Question is around custom UTM parameters. So we offer a lot of those recently, actually. That was one of your features in email. And do we offer that for SMS?
So within the first launch with Flows, we're not going to do anything automatic the same way you can with email. When we get to SMS Campaigns, that's where we would add it in, and you would be able to set them at the account level, similar to what you can do today.
Yes.
I think stage 3 was about responding to customers through Klaviyo, or can you plug in apps?
Yeah, so this question's around basically the SMS inbox feature and basically whether or not you can plug in other things to make that work, like integrations and things like that.
Yep, so the third launch, the SMS inbox, definitely includes responding through Klaviyo. We're also looking into which integrations to support with different help desks, for example.
Oh, one more. All right. Yeah.
Did the launch one include MMS, or is it quite short?
Question is like, when does MMS launch? Is that it?
Or with launch one in the flow, can you put images?
Got it. So with launch one in automation, will we do SMS and MMS?
Launch 1 will not have MMS yet. That will come with launch 2 in campaigns.
But that's for campaigns, right? Would that also be in flow?
It will also be in flows, yes. We'll update the builder experience to have the MMS attachment.
Last call for questions. Awesome. Well, I hope you learned something. Keynote's coming, the last final one. So thank you for coming. And yeah, talk soon.
Thanks.